It's time to spill the tea.
Hello!
You there, and welcome to
A Spoonful of Theatre! And this is one of our Spill the Tea episodes where we are reviewing a production in Singapore. And this time, it's the turn of Six, the international production that's here at the Marina Bay Sands. And we're stood right underneath Marina Bay Sands, aren't we, Sam?
Oh, it's a lovely venue.
I know,
have
aren't we
to
lucky
say.
to be here? It's
Yes,
great.
we're going up in the world, dear.
Now, full disclosure, I saw the original version of this in the West End and loved it. So this is not my first thoughts of the show. But Sam, you've never seen the show, so
No.
I'm going to dive right in with you. What did you think?
I loved
Six.
I loved every minute of it. I really did. It's such a different format. It's such a different style of musical. And I'm a history nerd.
Are you? I didn't know that.
This kind of approach is right up my street. I understood everything they were talking about, and I really enjoyed it for that reason. But I think, as a teacher, as an educator, the thing that I love about this musical the most is that it makes history cool. It makes history accessible, and that's what I love for it the most. What did you think, though?
I'm going to jump on the back of there before I say what I think. I think it is a bit like a musical TED Talk. It is, but I mean, imagine if every history lesson was this cool.
I agree.
You know what, I'm going to take this back to my head teacher and say, can the drama department make every history lesson like this? No, because I think it's a really interesting way to remember your history. And of course it's dramatized, but I mean, it's how you're going to remember things. And I remember most of this history now because I remember the songs from the show.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think for me, my impressions of this, obviously not my first impression because I saw it in London. I saw it in London, I can't even remember when, it was many years ago now, not long after it opened, and I loved it. I remember coming out of the theatre in London going, wow, that was a really fun hour and 20 minutes in the theatre. And I was really looking forward to watching it again here in Singapore. And it's just interesting, I think, watching it for a second time, because I definitely have come out not as buzzing as I did the first time, I must say. I still had a great night in the theatre, don't get me wrong, but I didn't come out as excited as I did the first time I watched it. And that's just a first thought, and I think I wouldn't say it's necessarily got anything to do with the cast or anything. I think it's just a format of musical that it will not be everybody's cup of tea. Because if you like going to the theatre for a linear story that is the same as everything, you know, like the same as any book musical, it is not that. I think you've got to go in with a mindset of, I'm going in for a good night. It is a concert. It's a musical concert in a musical theatre style, telling the history of Henry VIII.
It requires a lot of imagination because you're being told what was the stories. So it requires imaginations. And I don't know, if you don't have any context, that might be a little bit difficult.
You know what? I really wish we had like an extra guest today, because I mean, both of us grew up knowing the history of this, and I really would love, and maybe in the comments, you know, all of you listening, we would love to know what you think. If you drop us a message on Instagram, let us know what you think, because if you don't know the history already, because you know, for us, there's a lot of those. It's very British. You know, there's a lot of those puns.
Yes.
There's a lot of those. There's the sense of humour in the show is extremely British.
Yes.
So I really appreciate that, and I still love that, and I still love that kind of sense of Britishism in the show. But I don't know. I just think for me tonight, I know all the songs inside out because I've heard them thousands of times and worked on them. I still had a good night, but it is not as up there in my musicals favourites. I don't think it was ever in my favourites, but I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I did the last time, but I can't put my finger on why.
Well, TJ, let's go into the nitty-gritty now. Maybe you'll discover, as we break it down, what it was that has not made you
pop so much as the
first time round. So let's start with the cast. What did you think of the cast?
Overall, I think they were six very strong performers, and this show requires six strong performers. I mean, gosh, they have to sing, they have to belt their heads off, and they have to dance, and they have to be amazing storytellers, because there's nothing to hide from.
Yes.
They have pretty much one costume. They have no set other than the lights and the kind of like pop stage that they have.
Yes.
So there's nowhere to hide other than their moves and their voices. So the strength of performer that this show requires is really, really high. And I think overall they were a good cast. Now, Sam, I know you have some thoughts about one particular person
I do have thoughts, and I do agree with you. Very, very strong performances. Very, very strong performances. However, I do have a bone to pick with not the casting of Anne Boleyn, although she did stick out like a sore thumb by being American in a cast of 5 other British women. She did stick out, but also the portrayal, and this is the portrayal of Anne Boleyn. Now, I'm coming from a position where I know the history here. Anne Boleyn is what started all of this. Anne Boleyn caused the original Brexit. Anne Boleyn is not this bimbo character that's like a Duracell Energizer bunny. And it was really jarring for me because all of the other queens they had their quirks that fitted their characters, that fitted her story. Anne Boleyn's didn't.
Okay.
It did not suit her story. So that was my gripe, really. And I don't think she was just in sync with the others. Again, not a criticism against the performance. It's more a criticism of the portrayal.
I'm going to go into a rant of the exact same thing, but in a different angle. This is why you listen to A Spoonful of Theatre, because we get the audience perspective and the history nerd's perspective and the musical theatre technique perspective. I've had a gripe ever since they released 6 on Broadway. On Broadway, they decided to do all the show in an American accent.
Oh.
Which I was absolutely furious about because this is such a British show.
Can you imagine doing Hamilton in a British accent?
Yeah, exactly. If it was the other way around, there'd be uproar.
Yeah.
So I got really annoyed when they launched that, and it just sounds awful in an American accent. And I know that the concept of these queens, so like wherever they're from, like for example, the first queen, she was Welsh, okay, and she kept her Welsh.
She was brilliant.
But that character isn't Welsh, so we're not annoyed, because these queens came from different places in Europe, and they were not always, they're not from the UK, all of them. So technically they should have Spanish accents and German accents and French accents.
Yes.
And they did play on that every now and again for jokes, but overall they speak in their natural accent that they speak as actors. Okay, but I agree that because one of them was American with 5 other British women, an American accent just jarred.
It stood out.
It really, really jarred, and it did annoy me. That stood out to me, so that was a bit of a shame. But I thought she was still a great singer. But I think overall, the acting, the singing in American and speaking in American did annoy me. And I'm not as close to the history as you, so the whole portrayal of Anne Boleyn, I'm not so offended by because I don't know the history as well.
Now, the creatives, the production, the nuts and bolts that put this all together, what did you think on that?
I've always loved this. I think to do a musical theatre show like this when it's basically a pop concert, watching it again, I was like, seeing it for the second time, what they do with that set, so there's lots of lights hidden in the set that create different shapes at different times. Honestly, the lighting design is utterly phenomenal. Like, I think they really do a really good job. So they like mix concert lighting with storytelling and musical theatre. And one of the hardest things I was watching, they have so many very tight spots. And let me tell you, Sam, finding a spot on a stage sometimes, because they're doing quick dances and stuff, to get a specific light that's so tight like that is quite hard to do. And they were hitting them every single time, so they were very tight.
Do you think, where I noticed that the most was Holbein.
Yes.
I think that's where I noticed it the most, which was brilliant. I think one of my favourite songs of the night. But yeah, I see what you mean.
But yeah, the creatives, the costumes are beautiful. It's kind of, you see the Tudor aspect, but you also then see it as like more kind of modern pop with the glitz and the glamour. So I think the costumes really add something to it. And, it's got that history, but it's got that modern touch as well. So it's really nice as well.
I actually agree with you. I think it all fitted together really well. The costumes, the lighting design, the band being on the stage, the choreography. I think it all fitted so well with what the show was trying to do, which was to give a modern twist to a very dramatic part of history. Yeah. And I think it all worked very, very well. It was very colourful, very vibrant.
I want to give a massive shout out to the band actually, because the band, it's just a 4-piece band, so it's a rock band. They weren't they weren't using music. There was no sheet music on the stage at all.
Yes.
None of them had sheet music, which was great. I mean, pop songs can be, because you're usually following chord structures, but that's still great that's the case, because it really feels real that they're a rock band playing along with the cast. And there were some really nice differences that I just noticed musically. There were some different dynamic shifts on some words. Like there was a lovely moment on one of the Renaissance words in the early song, and they whispered it, which they don't normally do in the original. And I was like, oh, these are some nice little changes that obviously the show has a life and it breathes and it lives.
Yes,
with
and
different
evolves,
with
yes.
different musical directors, different casts. So Sam, who was your favourite Queen?
It changed.
Okay.
It wasn't Anne Boleyn, but it changed throughout the night.
I wonder why.
It changed throughout the night because some of the songs were so catchy. I'm going to give you my top 3. Yes, number 1, Catherine of Aragon, closely followed by Jane Seymour, because her riffs, the power in her song was just wonderful. And closely followed by number 4, Anne of Cleves. Loved her song.
Okay, I'm gonna bring in my point where I said I would disagree with you. Jane Seymour, Heart of Stone, is one of my favourite songs of the show. It's the song everybody sings. It's the big ballad that everybody sings. And she could belt at the end, but I was so annoyed at the beginning because the way she placed her voice at the beginning was very high. And it didn't live in a very warm place, which is kind of where we get those emotions that build that song up.
Right.
So she was kind of a little bit nasally. You've got a good heart, you know it changes. And in the original, it's kind of more in the kind of in your gut, kind of that.
Yes.
I've got a good heart, you know it changes.
Yes,
and you kind of really feel that warmth. So by the time we built up to that chorus, I wasn't feeling the emotion because the emotion lives in the voice where we would speak it. So actually, she was just speaking up here. You've got a good heart, so she didn't sound upset.
Right,
Because she didn't sound emotional. So if you don't place it in the right place, you don't build up to that. So I got a little bit sad, but she did have the amazing belts at the end.
Yes.
But what annoys me, and actually this is a big thing over the show, I kind of sat and thought about this, is people are just waiting for belts these days. I think most shows these days, audiences are just waiting for a big belt. And if you get the big belt, you're an amazing singer. If you don't get the big belt, you can't sing. The end.
Is that it? Is it that dichotomous?
That's what I feel that's what audiences are waiting for. And I think it's back from days of talent shows and X Factor and stuff. It's been the last 20 years.
Yeah,
but,
right.
everyone will still love her for that. But I think the actual storytelling didn't build because of the earlier notes, not because of the belt notes. So she got the belt notes, she can sing them. But for me, the earlier notes and those low notes are still just as important. So there is my little singing teacher red flag that I was a little bit annoyed about.
But then who is your favourite Queen, TJ?
Who was my favourite Queen? I think the first one. What was her name again?
Catherine of Aragon.
Catherine of Aragon.
It's your history, TJ.
Catherine of Aragon.
Catherine of Aragon.
I'm tired. Catherine of Aragon, I think she was great. She had such great comic timing. I think that actress really pulled that off. So, yes.
Now then, ladies and gentlemen, as you know by now that when TJ and I see a show, instead of giving stars for a review, we instead give spoonfuls. So, what TJ and I are about to do is, after the count of 3, we are going to say together how many spoonfuls we will give this show, and see if it matches, or if it doesn't. Are you ready, TJ?
Go.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, we're different.
This is the first time we've disagreed. What is wrong with you?
I've been debating ever since I came out of the theatre, because I think, honestly, technically and the production-wise, it's 4. But I'm going with my gut of what I felt as I came out, and I felt like it was. I didn't have like a phenomenal night in the theatre, but I didn't have a bad night. So to me, that's a 3.
Yes, okay,
so
fair enough.
Everything I've said, there is nothing wrong with the production, and I think the problem with star ratings is it feels like a 3 is bad, especially in Singapore. If we don't get an A, then we failed. Okay, but to me, a 3 is a really good, solid night out of the theatre.
Yes,
it's just not blown my mind.
Yes,
and I was really between a 4 and a 3, but I think really, if I listened to my gut, I had a 3 today.
Yeah. Fair enough.
And your 4?
A 4, very easy for me. It was the history. It was right up my street. It was the variety of music. Like House of Holbein was a bit of Eurovision. We had a bit of Spice Girls. We had a bit of girl power in there that I really enjoyed. But sadly, it won't get the 5th star from me because of the portrayal of Anne Boleyn. I just think it wasn't in sync with the rest of the queens, unfortunately.
You
But
didn't
nothing-
like Anne Boleyn.
Please, please.
Okay.
Anyway,
but I think everybody still should go see the show. Honestly, it's a really fabulous show. It's a good night out. Just know what you're getting yourself in for. It's not a typical musical.
No. Right, love, my tea's gone cold. Shall we leave it there?
We can, but can we upgrade to wine?
Oh, let me have a think of it. Yes.
Oh, fabulous.
So, to all the cast and crew of 6,
And to anyone else performing in Singapore theatre for the next few weeks,
break
a
a
leg.
leg.